welcome and thank you for coming. I'm Rick Vervoor. I'm director of our Sandbulte Center for Ethical Leadership. This event is sponsored by the Sandbulte Center. The center was created through a gift from Minnesota Power to honor its retiring chairman and CEO, Sandy Sandbulte. Delighted to introduce our guest today, Mr. Dave Gaddie. He is chairman, president, and CEO of Republic Bank in Duluth. He's been there since 2002. Republic has thrived under his leadership. Prior to joining Republic Bank, he was an executive at U.S. Bank, where he held a variety of positions, including serving as the Northern Minnesota Regional Bank President. He's active in our community. He's involved with Republic Bank Shares, the Area Partnership for Economic Development, APEX, and he serves on the Essentia Board of Directors. He holds a bachelor's degree in arts, Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Morehead State University, and he's a graduate of the Stonier Graduate School of Banking at Rutgers. Dave, welcome, and
thank you.
Thanks for speaking to our group today.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just for the sake of I think, simplicity, if you have questions as I go, by all means, raise your hand. I'll be happy to try to answer questions for you. I don't have a real structured talk. I tend to work off of an outline in my mind and then go from there. But by virtue of background, I've been at this business a long time. I started in 1971, so it's the only full-time employment I've ever had. Prior to that, I was a college student and spent a couple of years in the military during the early or later stages of the Vietnam War. So I started out in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and I think that the interesting part of my career is I started out in what are called unit banks or full functioning banks, where everything was managed under one roof. So you had the paying, the receiving, you had lending, you had HR. In our case, we had a trust department, etc. Over the course of a long period of time, banking evolved to, especially in the corporate world, since I was part of what became U.S. Bank, predecessor company, First Bank. Even in the late 70s, the banks all became First Banks. In the old days, I grew up, it was Red River National Bank. Very common to have geographical unique names to the banks, and it was done primarily for marketing purposes because people could associate with the Red River Bank and the Red River Valley of North Dakota per se. So we've evolved a long way in my 40 years, and I think the important part about that is, for me, Bruce Stender and some other folks who I know quite well, when I decided to leave, quote-unquote, retire at the end of 2001 from U.S. Bank, I did so with a purpose in mind, and I didn't really retire. I'd actually already had committed to go to work for Mr. Gino Paolucci, who is the shareholder, or was the shareholder prior to his death, 100% shareholder of Republic Bank and Republic Bank Shares. And the only thing unique about that is that Gino and I were banker-customer for a long period of time in my former life at U.S. Bank. And when he was looking to make a change in the management of his bank, he had offered the opportunity to me a couple of other times, and I had laughingly said to him, "Your bank is so small, I have customers that have bigger relationships than the total size of your bank." Well, that wasn't a very diplomatically, politically way to say no, but I did so once, and if not twice, and was reminded of that. In 2001, prior to 9/11, unfortunately, Gino called and said, "I'm going to replace my bank president at the end of the year. His contract's up, and I'm not going to renew. So, would you help me find his replacement?" And I said, "No, I can't do that because I have a conflict." Speaking of ethics and conflicts, but I'd be happy to put you in touch with some professional people who I think could do a good job. And there's a pause on the end of the phone, and he said, "And I'm going to ask you if you have any interest." Well, at that point in my life, I was intrigued by returning to the roots of being able to find out after 30 years if I could actually run a bank. When you work in corporate banking, you run lines of business and you have everybody else help support what you do. So it's very simple. I was responsible for only two things in the northern Minnesota market. That was the loan side and the deposit side of the bank. I didn't have to worry about anything else. So my role was pretty compact in the way that my daily activities were structured. Republic, at the time I went over, was about 110 million in size. Today we're about 340 million. And we've been able to grow because of relationships that have been established and because of the experience and the dedication of my staff. But the unique challenge for me was I truly wanted to find out at the end of my career if I could run a bank, grow a bank, and compete against the people that I had always been part of, the large banks. So I was challenged. Some of my compatriots thought I was going to retire, get work on my golf game, all that kind of thing. But actually it was like a rebirth for me because I felt that I had the skills and the commitment to make a Republic Bank grow and become a viable part of the community. And that was the Palucci goal. Gino had a very strong perspective of leaving a legacy for the community of Duluth and Hibbing, which is his hometown, and northern Minnesota. And because of that, even though he was very successful, made all of his money selling food products, the bank had a special spot in his heart because it was a community asset located here, driven by people that lived here. So he and I had a handshake deal, came over to Republic in 2002, and the bank had moderate success, wasn't in any trouble, but wasn't growing, wasn't very profitable. And so, being a finance guy, the first thing I did was put a budget together, sent it over to him, got a phone call from him, and he said, there's no way in hell you can make this much money in this bank, because before it was making about $900,000 to $1 million a year. I think our first budget was $2 million. And he didn't believe that we could do this, and I said, well, we'll do it. And we did. I think we did 2-2, and we've gone, pretty much, other than a couple of poor years, one poor year in 2009 when everybody was getting beat up in the banking industry, we've had a pretty successful run. I only point that out to say that when you look at what you can do in the business that you can accomplish, we don't do so in our world by beating up our competitors. We look at what we can do. And I think when you go forward in life, you need to look at it and say, what can I do? That gets you to the skills that you need. I'm a huge person with regards to selling. You need to know how to sell. You have to have sales skills. Sales skills are not just sales, they're relationships. And you build relationships by time. And the other thing I think that you have to do to be successful, you have to continually do the right things. That's frustrating a lot of times. You can do the right things over and over and over and not get what you want. You can't get a customer, you can't get his business, you can't get the forward progress that you want. So it's a daunting task, but you need to say, I am going to do what I know is right, and time, you'll be successful with that. I was mentioning to Rick prior to, when I came to Republic, we were a nothing factor in this marketplace in terms of banking. We got the garbage, the leftover, whatever. The bank was not very well operated internally, and it had a lot of potential loan problems in that the type of loan process that was in place was very weak. So the first thing I did was look at staff. I walked into that bank cold. I did not know the depth of the problems when I got there. I didn't look at anything ahead of time. I didn't make my decision based on what I would get when I got there. I made my decision on what I thought I could bring to the organization. So, point in fact, you want to be able to say to yourself, I'm going to do the right things. I knew I could do that. I knew I could build relationships because I'd already done it for 20 years in the market. And I knew I could attract the kind of people, staff people, that I needed. So I looked at the staff and I said, what do I have and what do I need? Fortunately, I had a very good operational staff, so there wasn't any needs there. I had a very poor, blown credit staff, lending staff, whatever you want to look at it and call it, and there was no way that we could make any progress with the people that we had. So I looked at it and said, I'll add a senior person. I've been blessed, and I do mean blessed. All of my staff, with the exception of one, used to work for me at U.S. Bank. So they were all happy enough, confident enough to leave a large organization to come to a small bank, pretty much one by one, but within the first 2 years, I believe, all of my commercial bankers were with me. And we took the tact of, as the same thing that we did at U.S. Bank, and that is that everybody in the marketplace is a potential customer for us. So we don't believe that we can't do anything with size. Size does not stop us. We have a lending capacity of about $5 million, and we use it, but we have relationships with other banks where we can bridge much larger transactions. And we've done larger transactions. So, case in point, we said we're going to be the best community bank in northern Minnesota. It took a while, but we're pretty much there. We've worked really hard. We fall in about the top 10 percentile in the state of Minnesota for all banks. So I think we've accomplished that goal. But we never rest on our laurels, because every year, starting in November, we do a new budget. And in spite of the fact that it's hard to grow and people say, how can you do it? We look at 3, 4, 5. Last year we grew 7%. The budget called probably for about 4. So we always try to achieve the budget and beat the budget. And I think we do so because we continually do the right things. The other thing, one of the questions here is, what are the sort of the 3 things that you've learned along the way? Well, I think if you're a manager, you have to have faith in people, because I'm a band leader. I can't do everything. So I got to have, my staff's got to believe in what I do, and I've got to believe in what they do and support them. We have an unwritten rule in my bank, and that is that if you work for me and you make a decision, I back that decision. I don't second guess it. We might talk about it later. If it costs us money, too bad. Because if I don't give you that responsibility and that commitment and that authority, then you can't represent the bank in a full capacity, because you're always going to have to say, and I hate this, I'll check and see what I can do. So you work Republic Bank, in your role, you know what you can do and you're expected to do it. So I think you have to have faith and confidence in people. I oftentimes think this is overlooked, and that is, I wouldn't be where I'm at today without good mentors, really good mentors. I think you need to find people that can help you with whatever job, whatever role, whatever company, whatever capacity you're in, and look at them and say, they can help me get to the next level, whether it's 1 level or 2 or 5 up. I was privileged over the course of time to have people who had probably more faith in me than I deserved at certain ages, and they threw me into the fire, and I wasn't always successful, but I always learned, and they had the confidence and the support. So a mentor will help you move along. I think it's very difficult to work alone without the support of someone at a higher level in whatever organization that you're in. And I've talked about this over and over. It's repeating the correct behavior. You need to think about, what should I do? What are the key responsibilities of my job? And you need to plan what you're going to do. We don't go anywhere on a customer call, whether it's an existing customer or a prospect, that we don't have a plan. The first couple times, way back when, my bankers said, come on along. And we're in the car and we're driving, and I said, okay, what's the purpose? What are we doing? What are we going for? Well, we're going to ask them for some business. I said, well, that's obvious, but how are we going to do this? What have you thought about? What do you know about them? You can't go to someone's business and ask them to give you trust and faith if you don't know anything about what they do. Whether they're, how successful, what are their products, what are their history. In today's world online, you can find out just about anything about anybody. So I think you need to be prepared. We have 275, I suppose, commercial loan relationships in our bank. I would say I've met all 275 of those people, and I think I can, by name, recognize them. I think that's important. I don't think it's the most important thing, but I think it's very important. When people come into the bank and I'm there, my office is right off the teller line, so I'm very available and visible. My staff knows they can bring people down, or they'll call me on the phone and say, come on down and meet so-and-so. I think it's important to stay in contact with your customers, because the presumptiveness of a customer today will be a customer tomorrow is absolutely wrong. Just like thinking your staff today is going to be your staff 5 years out. Not necessarily true. Everybody that's good has an opportunity to go to the next level, and someone's out to take away your best performers. So you want to keep them happy, productive. You need to keep them challenged. In our bank, that's a bigger problem than a bigger organization because we only have so many jobs at the top, as you would expect. But I do think you need to be thinking about where do you want to go as you go forward. I started as a trainee in a formal training program in a big bank, and within 6 months, I was naive enough to think within 5 years I could run that bank. That was my goal. It wasn't a very realistic goal, but it was my goal. I told people what my goal was. I did everything that I could to get there. I didn't make it, obviously. Shouldn't have made it. It was a ridiculous goal, but it was a goal. So when you start someplace, you need to think about where do I want to go and what do I have to do to get there, and you have to be willing to make the commitment to do that. I think one of the misconceptions that happens in the world today with a lot of positions is that people don't expect that they have to give more than what the employer gives. I don't buy into that. I think you have to be willing to sell yourself internally as much as you sell yourself externally, and you have to be willing to give of yourself and challenge yourself to go through the uncomfortable steps of whatever it is that you have to do to accomplish the next level of success. Question is, what kind of characteristics do you think important leaders should have? I think you can just about say anything you can dream up there. I think vision. In my job, the key things are vision, strategy, understanding, and being flexible. We almost never have a day that starts out the same as you expect it to, and it rarely ends the way that you hope it will. It's always about adjusting on the go. I can have a full calendar, I can have an empty calendar, and before the day is over, a lot of the things I thought I was going to do, didn't get to. It changed. It was necessary to make changes. You got to be flexible. You need to have, and I say this in the vernacular of, I think street smarts are very important. I don't think you can be taught street smarts, but I think you can watch people who have street smarts and you can assimilate the process of what they do. In our business, it's extremely important because you have to evaluate people when you talk to them one-on-one. All right, is it truthful? Is it full amount of knowledge? Do they answer questions when I ask them? Do they know enough about their business? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And you pick these things up if you can make a quick assessment of someone after you've met them. And secondly, and almost as importantly, is if you go to their place of business and you see how they run that place. You can't be a banker in a bank. You have to be a banker on site. You have to know your customers. You have to see what they do. You have to see how they do it. You have to watch their employees. You have to come to a conclusion of, is this a successful operation and why is it? You get a huge amount by just being part of a tour, an opportunity to meet some of the employees. Oftentimes when we have larger organizations that are customers, we'll ask the owner, CEO, whatever, to bring the CFO, sometimes the salespeople. It helps to get a broadening of exposure to the complete management group. Because then you can understand, how does the CEO think? How do the people, what kind of respect do they have for him? Is he a good leader? Do they want to work for him? Is there that commitment? And the other thing I think is, it's always in our business about, ethical good judgment. I understand this is an ethics class, but in our world, and you know what's gone on in banking, it's been, the industry per se has been beaten up, battered, and rightfully so in some cases. I don't think the community banks are necessarily the banks that have been problems, but you get lumped in as a bank, and so you have to deal with all of the things that go on, and the constant efforts being made by someone to break into your computer systems, try to get information in any kind of an unethical, illegal way, and basically you have to be on top of it all the time, because the world today is a 24/7 revolving process. And what we think goes on 8 to 8 or 8 to 5 is not what happens. As an example, we are a fairly small bank. We have a data company, an outside company that checks for potential invasions of our computer systems. You would think that a Republic Bank, $340 million in northern Minnesota, isn't much of a target. Last year we had 4.4 million hits from outside technology, and these people are very smart geniuses who are trying to figure out how to break in. So when a Target or any of these companies gets compromised, believe me, it can happen. So we have every day, someone on my staff will say they got a phone call from Mr. Jones inquiring about his mother, grandmother, aunt, uncle, friend, whatever, trying to get information. Usually it's a simple call. I know that they have an account here, and they probably are correct about that, but there's the reach all the time for the breach of security, the breach, the opportunity that people are looking for to be dishonest, something that we have to deal with all the time. One of the questions is, how often do you have small ethical issues? Every day, all day long, because in our business, people are always trying to figure out how to steal, is what it amounts to, from someone else. And so staff has to be on top of it. We have all kinds of emails that come from all over the world. The latest one is the FedEx. It looks pretty real, inquiring about information, verification, on and on and on. So we work in this world of where the most valuable thing we have are A, relationships, and B, the trust of our customer. Without the trust of our customer, we can't be a bank. People put their money with us, they trust us to take care of it, pay them a rate of interest, and manage that money so that it's not lost, not stolen, not used for illegal, unethical purposes. I think that's a huge responsibility. That's the one that I feel the most. When I have people say to me, and it does happen, is my money safe in your bank? Yes, it's insured for $250,000, but is it safe? Yes, it is safe. And I don't mean safe from bank robberies, because occasionally those happen today too, but not very often. But they want to feel the comfort of knowing that we're doing the right thing as an organization to keep their money very, very safe. So I think when I look at the third point, what are the key skills that have helped you succeed in life, and what skills should students develop? I've covered a lot of them, but one of the things I think that's important when you're younger and starting out is learn to listen and ask questions, and don't assume. You won't be embarrassed if you ask questions. You'll learn a lot more, and I think it's very important to understand whatever directions you're given, because then you can do your job the most effectively and do it the most successfully for yourself and for the good of the organization. Developing relationships, it's all about time. You never develop a relationship overnight. You just can't do it. I came to Duluth in 1987. I'm still doing business with people that I started building relationships in 1987. I'm getting business, and my bank is getting business from people that I've talked to for 20 years and never did any business with us. Because you do the right things, you stay in contact with them, and then when they need help and it doesn't come from wherever they're doing their business at, they think, well, maybe I'll give Republic Bank a chance. It takes forever, and you got to be willing to be committed to it. You need to look for opportunity. It's everywhere. And if you don't look, you'll do what a lot of people say, and there isn't any new business to be had in the city of Duluth. That's not true. So it's everywhere. You listen to people, you ask your friends, you look at the cranes. By that time it's probably too late, but you start paying attention to proposed projects, build a network. A network's very, very important. Lawyers, accountants, insurance people, those three are good sources for business because usually whomever is going to do a project's already talked to them on the front end. So you have to be looking for opportunity. We do things every week in my bank. On Wednesday we have a staff meeting, and oftentimes what we'll do is take about 5 to 10 minutes and say, okay, Mark, what have you seen? Where have you been this week? What did you see that's happening? And I don't do it to put people on. They all know we're going to talk about it. It's just an information gathering opportunity. And so we want to be saying to ourselves, if we see, is someone on staff aware of what that might be? Have we been out there? Is there an opportunity for us? Are we trying to get in front of whomever? The next thing you got to do is get in front of the decision makers at whatever level you're at. It doesn't do any good to talk to people who can't make decisions. There's always gatekeepers, and so you got to get past gatekeepers, and I believe you do that by preparation, as I said on the front end, having a plan when you go in, and selling yourself because you do have enough of a commitment between yourself and what you're trying to accomplish in the case of business, building a relationship, that you've put forth the effort, and those people can see that you have and that they're willing to spend time. We go in all the time in places where people are very perfunctory on the front and pretty much are giving us a courtesy opportunity, but they want us out of there in 5 minutes. But if we can engage them in meaningful conversation and they can see that we care about their business and want to learn, you get to 10 minutes and 15 minutes, and sometimes you get Mr. Cold to take you out into his shop and show you around, because everybody has pride in what they do. But you do it because you're working to build that relationship, and you've looked for the opportunity. And I think the other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is you always need to know where you want to get to. And this is a selfish thing, but I got to tell you, business is selfish. If you don't know where you want to go, you won't get there. And you can't get there if you haven't thought about it. And if you get there by luck, chances are you won't stay there. So when you think about, I'm starting here and I want to get here, how do I do it? What do I have to do? Who do I pay attention to? I spend a lot of time, I have some young people on my staff. We spend a lot of time in my bank talking about, because they all have the same drive, and that is to have my job, and I think that's perfectly fine. Everybody that works for me should want my job. That's my attitude. That was always my attitude. And we talk about what do you have to do to get there, whether it's educationally, whether it's experience, in or outside the bank. We spend a lot of time and money on educating our people. We can't do it so much internally, so we do it externally. But I do think you need to be thinking about, and we also have a tuition reimbursement program for undergrad and grad programs for our staff, as long as they're doing something that's, conducive to their job. And in our case, just about any kind of a educational background somehow fits. I think those are important things. But you need to know where you want to go so you can get there. And you need to think about it in the time period of, how long is it going to take? Can I move that time period up? And can I manage my frustrations? Frustrations are a difficult thing to manage in the workforce because everybody wants to get paid more and have more responsibility, or at least get paid more. Getting paid more generally comes with more responsibility, but it also comes with being able to be successful in managing that. I have people who want to be managers, and I've seen this especially in my former life, and that is they would say, I want to be a manager, and you would say, okay, you can start up by managing administrative assistant. No, I want to manage the commercial banking group. No, you can't do that. Well, why not? Because you don't have any experience at it. You need to start small and prove you can do it. Managing people is very difficult. There's all kinds of the dynamics that go on. All of us have personal lives. We have business lives. Everything changes every single day. Today's workforce, there's a lot of two-income families. There's nothing traditional about the workforce anymore like it used to be. So there's the dynamics that are going on of who takes care of sick kids, who leaves work, who goes, how do they do it. We have personal time off in my bank. It's pretty common nowadays versus vacation. So you get so many days of personal time off every year, you can use them any way you want to. But you only get a finite number. So you have to manage that, and that's a change. And the old days, it used to be you got so many sick days, so many this kind of thing. Now employers are simply saying, I can give you this many days, you figure out how you're going to use them. Any questions to this point? Okay?
Right here.
Sure, yes.
Question I have for you is, when you look at the ranking for Republic Bank, is that just for banks, or does that include credit unions?
Just banks.
Okay.
Yep, and I will be honest with you, credit unions are becoming more and more of a factor and a force in this marketplace. I'm sure you've all seen, if you're paying attention, they're building beautiful new buildings, more strategically located. The advantage they have is they don't pay tax. That's a huge advantage. So they can operate from the standpoint of they have, say, 50% of their earnings per se that we don't have available to work with. But it is the nature of the world today. So it doesn't do any good to complain about them. I think we have an advantage in a community bank with a good lending staff is that we can compete and provide expertise in the business world that most credit unions today at least aren't prepared to do so. They're more of a retail-driven organization, and I think they do a good job there. But our focus is really on the private bank and on the commercial banking business in this market. We're not a retail bank. I think you have to leave that to the Wellses and the USs of the world and the credit unions, because they can do and are willing to do many more kinds of transactional business, and they do it at a much cheaper either rate and or interest rate. So, but I think there's a lot of assets that are in the hands of credit unions in the northern Minnesota today. Okay, any other questions? I brought a couple of pages of the Code of Ethics that we have at Republic Bank. I'm going to pass them out. And I only did this so you can see. We might have to share here. I think we've got about 30 of them. I just brought the first 2 pages, and you'll see when you get the copy that we have about 12 pages of a Code of Ethics written policy. Ours might be a little more inclusive than other types of businesses for all kinds of reasons, as I've already stated, and that is the trust, the relationship, the care, the responsibility for someone else's money. But when you look at this, we do 3 things with this. Every year the board sees this. Every year the board reapproves it, whether we've changed it or not. We generally do it at our annual meeting, which was about a month ago. We talk about this. I talk about this because it's important. I have an unusual situation. I have board members who are non-shareholders. As I said earlier, the Palucci family owns all the stock in the bank, but these people are still board members, and they need to be as much inclusive on the Code of Ethics and understand how we operate and our 75 people as whether or not they are an employee. So you can see all the different categories that we cover. We take this very, very seriously. People cannot abide by this. Every year they're asked to read it and sign it. Now the presumption is if they sign it, they've read it. Sometimes that comes to be not true, and that can be a problem. But we expect people to live by this. We have a lot of issues in banking that are somewhat unique to other types of businesses. Between the way we do business with customers, we offer our customers lunch, dinner, tickets to ball games. In the old days, the Palucci family used to have a wonderful fishing camp up in Canada called the Outpost. People would get invited to go to that. We still have Viking tickets and Wild tickets, Gopher tickets and Bulldog tickets and Scholastica tickets and all these kinds of things. And we give these out freely to our customers as a way to say thank you. In the old days, everybody happily took those tickets. Today, a lot of companies have instructed and require their employees to not become part of that because of the potential of unnecessary influence. Now think about it. You get a couple of tickets to the DSSO as an example. It might be a $50 gift. You wouldn't think that that could be influence. But it's the fact of the matter is that the organization views it from the standpoint of they don't want their employees to be compromised. Conversely, we get people, customers, especially around the holidays, all in the kindness of their hearts, who offer us gifts. Can be alcohol, can be candy, can be reverse tickets coming back our way, or something more substantive. We have a lot of customers who have access to recreational things of their own that they own, either for their own use and or their company entertainment. So now the world has gone 360. So how do we deal with that? If you read the whole policy, we've got a $25 limit in there. So anybody can get anything for $25 as long as it's not, illegal, immoral, whatever. No problem. Beyond that, and it happens, I ask my people to come to me and say, so-and-so offered me the opportunity to go to Canada, go fishing for 2 or 3 days. It's at their place. How do you feel about it? It's not a simple answer. I look at every one of them differently. If it's a very, I would say, solid relationship, banking relationship, where I know that the customer doesn't need to try to use influence with staff to get what they would need, whether they have now or going forward, my comment is usually, look, I think it's a good idea. Go, continue to add to the relationship, but you need to offer to pay. Not necessarily for your lodging accommodations or for the use of the boat or things of that nature. But there's a balancing point here. If there's food to be purchased or other kinds of things, please offer. We should share. I think that's how you bridge that gap of a one-way situation. But we have daily, I have been offered, I know my staff has gifts that are, way beyond what they should be in value. And I know people do it generally because they want to. And I appreciate that. And it's very hard to tell somebody who's a customer, I can't accept that. Because it's an offensive thing from their perspective of, they don't necessarily see it the same way, but you have to explain to them, look, we have a policy, we adhere to the policy, and we can't accept expensive gifts. We've had things offered, $5,000 watches. Can't do it. Well, I want to do it because my banker's a friend of mine. Understand that, but it's not an acceptable situation. And it oftentimes can be a difficult matter for both the giver and the receiver, because the receiver obviously would like to have a nice watch in this case, and the giver thinks it's a pretty special thing to do that. And I respect that, and most of the time of anything of value, I offer to insert myself and say, well, let's talk to them about it. But we get into these kinds of things, and I think it's important for you to understand that it could happen to you. People, intentionally or otherwise, give gifts, and not always with the right purpose in mind. There could be some attempt to influence behavior on your part at some point down the road. And the last thing anybody ever wants to be in is the position of, well, I gave you this, and I expected that you would do, and now I need you to step up, and all these kinds of things, and you're compromised, and you're in an ethical dilemma. And what do? You feel bad. You don't want to say no. You don't want to lose the relationship. You don't want me to be upset because I probably won't know what happened. And there's all these various factors that come into play. So if you keep it on a level playing field on the front side, then generally you avoid all those issues on the back side. But we have, and you can think, if you just look at this, I don't think there's too many things that you could come up with that we haven't tried to cover. And we do this so that people get a grasp of the scope of where all of these things could be a problem. It's not just simply, personal financial responsibility seems obvious if you work in a bank, but everybody can have financial problems. It doesn't matter where you work. So we ask people to look at this, understand it. If they have problems, come and talk to us before it becomes a bigger issue. Drugs, non-discrimination. Safeguarding of confidential information is the number one probably risk we have every day. I have a clean desk policy. At the end of the day, and I walk around often enough to know your desk better be clean, there better not be files, there better not be customer information out there, because the first people that see it are the cleaning staff that come in every night. They don't have any reason to see that. It's none of their business. If it's on the desk, if it's laying there like this, the temptation is, and it says something up there and they happen to recognize the business and or the name, curiosity says, oh well, I'll take a look at it. If we get compromised because of any of those things, it's our reputation. It's not the guy who does the cleaning. So clean desk policy, put it away. We're responsible for it. I need to be able to tell my customers when they ask, no one sees your information unless they need to. And I mean that. We keep things at levels so that you have to have a reason and a need to be in the loan files. It's not, no disrespect to a drive-in teller, but they have no need to be in the loan files downstairs in the vault. So we have to do this because we have to be able to say in clear conscience and clear mind, straightforwardly, we respect and guard your information. And that's the only way that we can do it. And then you get into all kinds of complicated matters, as I just said, where there can be something coming from one direction and ends up causing you trouble down the road. Any questions about anything on here? Yes, sir.
Since I'm not asking no any questions, I've been around it, I guess, a few years. What is your budget for, if you can divulge this, just for like hacking and computer? Because you know that's escalating everywhere. Just curious, I'm sure it's a line item on your budget. You know, you're going to spend X amount of dollars preventing this. Last
year we spent about $90,000, which, you know, given or take the size of your organization. In our organization, that's a noticeable line item expense.
Right.
Yeah, and this year I think we budgeted over 100, and you just have to keep doing it because it just keeps getting worse and worse as you go forward. Anyway, one of the things it says here: please share an ethical dilemma you have faced and how you dealt with it. I'll give you a good example. There was a guy by the name of Louis J. Perlman. Probably doesn't mean anything to most of you. His main claim to fame was he was the creator, developer, manager of the Backstreet Boys. Somewhat past. They were very, very successful, very hot item in terms of the entertainment world. Lou Pearlman lived in Orlando, Florida, but he had business interests a lot of places in the country. We, being Republic Bank, through connections and partnerships with some other banks that we do business with, bought a participation in a loan on one of Lou Pearlman's quote-unquote projects in the Orlando, Florida area. Long story short, Lou Pearlman is a crook. He's been doing time in the federal penitentiary, 25 years. He's about 5 years into that. Because he had one of the original Ponzi schemes. Wasn't nearly as big as Tom Petter's and some of the others, but it was substantial. When all said and done, it was well over $100 million. Part of that whole scheme was a relationship that he had with a bank that's no longer in existence called Mercantile Bank. And long story short, the group of banks that we were in that had refinanced loans at Mercantile Bank were ultimately the ones who ended up, when Lou Pearlman went broke and was charged with fraud and all kinds of other federal crimes, ended up being on the losing end of a fairly significant amount of money. I think our total loan participation package was like $40 million. We had a couple million of that. So it was pretty substantial for a bank like Republic. We came to find out, as a group, we hired an private eye to do some investigation, because early on the unwritten word per se was that Mercantile Bank had not handled their banking matters with Pearlman in a honorable and ethical, legal manner. So the private eye uncovered a few things. We hired some lawyers, we hired some forensic accountants and all kinds of people. And ultimately, I'm just giving you the short version, about $350,000 of fees later, including lawyers, after Lou Pearlman pled guilty to all these crimes, ended up being in jail, had gone through trial, got his sentence. So we're now 3 years after the fact. We get to court in Minnesota. And of course, the battle was Mercantile, which had been subsequently acquired by a TD Dominion Bank out of Canada, huge bank. They had acquired Mercantile, and so they were the surviving bank per se. And we had our bank group of about 20 banks. We were out $40 million plus fees. We had a Minneapolis law firm. We were in court for 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks. I happened to testify along with many other bankers. The ethical issue was Mercantile covered up Lou Pearlman's financial problems. They kept it at a very low level. They had people signing, forging documents for approvals and renewals and all kinds of extensions and on and on and on. And when they were to be paid out, the deal was that they were supposed to stay in, not paid in full, but mostly paid, about 80%. They were going to stay in for a few $1,000,000. Well, they managed to maneuver their way out of it entirely, and of course then when Pearlman's empire crashed, the rest of us were left holding the bag. We got into this ethical kind of gray world of proving in court to a jury that the way banks do business has to be somewhat on a trust me. If you're going to do business with another bank, the information they give from you give from them has to be honorable, upright, good, bad, or otherwise, so you can make a prudent decision, a rightful business decision. We didn't get that from the folks at Mercantile. And so I think we had 10 bankers on our group testify. It was pretty gut-wrenching because the defense attorney was a very, very sophisticated, well-known, hard-nosed defense attorney, very skilled in business and litigation matters. And he was very good at making all of us feel like we were stupid, uneducated, inexperienced, took way more risks than we should have, on and on and on. And to a person, we held our ground. We had a bank expert come in. Sometimes those can work in your favor or not, and say, no, this is normal business practice. The banks followed this business practice. We followed it, all the banks through. We did our due diligence. There were a lot of things that made this turn into what it did. But it made us all, I think, especially in my bank, realize the importance of being upfront, straightforward, ethical, knowledgeable, and willing to commit the resources necessary to prove that your organization is that way. We ultimately ended up as a bank group collecting all $40 million from Toronto Dominion plus interest, which was another $17 million. But we only, I think, became successful at it because we were all willing to stake our reputation as bank groups, as community bank groups, and our personal reputations that we knew what we were doing and we did things from our side in an honorable and ethical way. So that's probably the largest issue. Over the course of time, we have all kinds of, as I said, ethical dilemmas where we have to make difficult decisions. And I always tell my people, if we have to say no, we need to say no in a professional way, and we need to know why we say no. So to me, those are all ethical issues, because when you tell someone you're not willing to lend them money, lend them more money, do something that has an effect on their livelihood, it's a very, very personal thing. And we need to do it professionally and ethically and morally. And sometimes that's not easy to do. So thank you. Be happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Sure, fire away.
You talk about the importance of relationships and building a network. What should students be considering as they go into a particular profession? What's worth their time getting involved with to meet people?
Well, I think that if you start out as a entry level person, and I know I'm a dinosaur because of my career has basically been a banker forever. But if you start out in a business and you think you want to be part of that business and commit to it, please do so with the idea being that you're going to work to build internal relationships from the day you get there, because I think the important thing is, and we all recognize as employers, that people are going to come and go. But if you leave with a good reputation and a good experience from your former employer, and I say laughingly, for the first couple of years that I was at Republic after I left U.S., they were calling me and asking me to come back. And I felt flattered by it, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do. But I think it was because of my time, my reputation, my success, and the way that I managed myself while I was there. And I think that's important for everybody when you start out. Don't just have a job, go to work, appear as if you're interested, look like you should look for whatever that look needs to be for whatever type of business that you're in, and be willing to listen and learn. I think I have a lot of young people. I would say they're all very bright, but as I've told them time and time again, I know that you don't need to tell me that. So I think the thing to remember is let your employer recognize your skills, not the other way around. So,
Dave, in addition to your great success as a banker, as Rick explained in the introduction, you've been very involved in this community in civic activities and economic development for the community. Talk to the students a little bit about the role of a leader in regard to the community outside their profession.
Sure. Yeah, I think that early on in everybody's career, and I promote this idea with my staff, and we certainly give people the time to participate in outside activities. In a lot of cases, we give them support that they need as well. But to me, you can't be in a community and not be committed to the community and not be part of the community, and so that means you got to give something back. If you take everything, I don't care what business you're in, I think people recognize you as a taker, not a giver. There's got to be a balance. All communities, all organizations, profit, nonprofit, need people to help support whatever their efforts are. We have a committed budget every year for donations. We don't have a website that says you can go and find out what it is that we donate money to or give money to, because I don't want to be limited. We do it where we think there's the greatest need. We promoted, we're the lead gift on the Solvay Hospice House, but we've done lots of, that was a $600,000. We don't do that very often. It was a multiple year gift, but we give away about $250,000 every year to worthwhile organizations. I'm a huge fan and supporter of the United Way. Republic Bank didn't have a United Way corporate program when I got there. So the first year I said, okay, here's what we'll do. Every dollar that we give, we'll match dollar for dollar. That started out the first couple of years, we had $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. Last year we as a company put out $38,000. So our United Way gift was $76,000. And now I've had people say, where does it stop? It doesn't stop. If you put the money up, we match it. Personally, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to be involved in organizations. I get asked to be on a lot of things. My staff does, because most organizations like to have bankers. They like to have finance people. They think it's a good thing, and I do think it is a good thing. But it takes a lot of time away from sometimes your work, most of the time your family. And so you have to have a supportive situation at home. It's a little bit more difficult, as I said earlier, because there's a lot of families are dual working families. So again, you got to manage and you got to balance it all out. But you can't be in a community if you're not part of it. I would feel really bad if I wasn't part of of organizations, and all I expected would be for them to do business with us, and we don't give anything back. So we are in service organizations, we're in nonprofits, we're on the board of directors. I was one of the founding members, and the bank was, of Apex when we started that, an effort, and I think it's had decent success of trying to do a private sector economic development effort in northern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. So we wouldn't say require, but strongly support the idea of having people involved. And we have a staff, we have a lot of people who do a lot of different things, and we keep track of it, not so much for any reason other than to see all the good things that they do. So it's very, very important. I think it starts at an early age and experience levels, and there's certainly things that some of my younger staff do, and they're very engaged in, and I think they're doing a really good job, and I get compliments, and that's good, so I'm happy for that. But it's necessary. And there's more ways than money, believe me. A lot of organizations just need help. They need money, but they need help, so they need commitment of time. Anything else? Okay, well, thanks.